Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you. I was up late last night, so I apologize. I hope you enjoyed that last night. I meant what I said in that debate. As a Republican, I feel, everybody keeps talking about, oh, we have so many people running for president. I think we're honored to have so many good people running for president. As I pointed out last night, the Democrats can't even come up with one good candidate, so I think we're in good shape. So my first red state gathering happened to be the first one ever, the one 6 years ago. I remember it was here in Atlanta. I believe it was at a Hyatt or one of the hotels. It was a smaller gathering than this. And I was just a candidate for the Senate. Nobody knew a lot about me. And I was in a campaign that no one gave much of a chance. That wasn't so long ago, just 6 years ago, and time flies so quickly. And that's important because Eric has asked us to speak today about how we view this country by the year 2020. What will America look like 5 years from now? We look back just 6 years from now and see how much the world has changed in our country and our political process. And so we realize that the year 2020 will be here quicker than we even imagine. It's a really important question. I said it last night. I believe it with all my heart. This election has to be about the future because America has always been about the future. A nation proud of its history, without a doubt. But we have always been a nation of people that believe that as great as our history has been, an even greater future awaits. And if there's anything that troubles me is that that sense seems to have eroded. So let's start by laying out some perspective. Yes, our country faces extraordinary challenges, important challenges, as it always has. But what country in the world would you trade places with? What nation on earth would you rather be? What people would you trade places with? The last time I checked, there weren't boatloads of American refugees washing up on the shores of Brazil. And Brazil's a bad example. They need any country for that matter, on the shores of the Bahamas or Jamaica, well, maybe on vacation, but this is still a great country. It really is. What troubles us is it can be even greater. What troubles us is that it's not fulfilling its potential, and we know that it isn't, because we feel it in our everyday lives. Why is that happening? The answer to that question will answer what this country needs to look like in 2020. Here's reason number one. The economy is rapidly transforming. 10 years ago, there would be no red state. 10 years ago, many of the people who influenced the political process would not be in business. You had to work for a major syndicate, or you had to work for a big newspaper if you wanted to give your opinion. That alone gives you an example of how much the world has changed. But let's go further. I pointed out this last night in the debate. The largest retailer in the world owns not one single store, Amazon. The largest ground transportation company doesn't own a single car, Uber. The largest hospitality company, Airbnb, doesn't own a single hotel, much less hotel room. This is a different economy. And it's not just different, it is changing faster than the economy has ever changed. You know, when the telephone was invented, it took it 75 years to reach 100 million users. It took Instagram 2 years to reach 100 million users. It took Candy Crush less than 1 year to reach 100 million users. So not only is the world different, it is changing faster than it's ever changed before. So the question for America is, are we going to be left behind by these changes, or are we going to influence them? Are these innovations going to happen here, or are they going to happen somewhere else? And they've been disruptive. Many of the jobs that once sustained families are either gone, replaced by a machine, or they don't pay what those jobs once paid. I understand they've been disruptive. And it makes our people feel insecure about today and fearful of the future and what it means for their children. But the new economy holds the promise of creating jobs to replace the old jobs that actually pay more. The question is, will those jobs be created in America in 2020? Or will they be created in China? Will they be created in America or in India? In America or in Canada? That's the choice we have to make. Now, I will tell you that in making that choice, we remember that big government has never been a good idea, ever. But you could get away with it to a certain extent in the 20th century because we didn't have that much competition. Half the world was communist. The other half was struggling. And America was the one place on earth where you could do business. That's not the case anymore. We now compete with dozens of developed economies, all trying to be like us. And so the first question that will decide what this nation looks like in 2020 is, will we or will we not be the best place in the world to create the best jobs of the 21st century? And that's where the opportunity lies for the conservative movement. You see, if we want to be the best place in the world to create those jobs, it starts with a tax code that makes us the best place in the world to create those jobs. So, that's why we want to lower taxes on all businesses, especially small businesses. That's why we want to have a tax code, thank you very much. That's why we want to have a tax code that says the more people you hire and the more you invest in your company, the less you'll owe the IRS. That's why we want a tax code that says if you're an American company and you have millions of dollars overseas that you made in another country, we want you to bring that money back and we won't double tax you. That's why we want tax reform, because it makes us the best place in the world to create those jobs. That's why we want regulatory reform. We want regulatory reform because we know the more regulations, the less innovation. The more regulations, the harder it is for someone to start a business out of the spare bedroom of their home. You want evidence of that? For the first time in 35 years, we have more businesses dying than we do businesses starting. That doesn't sound like America, and it doesn't sound like our potential. But if we reduce regulations, we can change that. And we have devastating regulations. One was just issued on Monday of this week. It basically created this carbon mandate out of the EPA. And you know what that's going to do? It's going to make everything in America more expensive, not the least of which is starting a business. But you know who it really hurts? The people who are trying to make it. If you're a rich billionaire in California who feels guilty because for years and years you were a polluter, maybe you can afford a $1,000 increase in your utility bill. But if you're a single mother raising 2 children in Atlanta or anywhere in this country, and your utility bill goes up by $50, that's catastrophic. And that's what these radical environmental policies are doing to America and are doing to our economy. And that's why we need to reverse that decision from the EPA. The third thing we need to do if we want to lead the world in the best new jobs by the year 2020, we have to lead the world in energy production. We have been blessed with oil and natural gas and abundant resources. We need to fully utilize them. And if we do, we will create a manufacturing renaissance in America. The fourth thing we need to do if we want to be the best place in the world by the year 2020 to create the best paying jobs, we have to repeal and replace Obamacare. And people always say, well, replace it with what? And I say it's pretty simple. Replace it with a system that empowers the individual. Replace it with a system that says from now on, every American will be able to use tax-free money, whether it's a tax credit or your own money or money your employer gives you, and you will be able to use it to buy health insurance across state lines of the kind you want from any company in America that will sell it to you. The fifth thing we need to do to lead the world in the best new jobs of the 20th century by the year 2020 is we must balance our budget. The national debt, by the way, is not just an accounting problem. The national debt is a job killer. It guarantees a debt crisis. It is the most predictable crisis in American history, and neither party has done enough to address it. To deal with a debt crisis, we have to deal with the cause of the debt. And what's driving our long-term debt problem is very simple. Social Security and Medicare are structured for future generations, in a way that's not sustainable. Now, before people gasp and say, oh, they're going to hurt people on Medicare, let me remind people of something. I live in Florida. There are a lot of people in Florida on Medicare and Social Security. My mother is one of them. I would never be for anything that is bad for my mother. I don't want her Social Security to change. I don't want her Medicare to change unless it gets better, and guess what? It doesn't have to change. When I talk about changing Social Security and Medicare, you know who I'm talking to? I'm talking to me. I'm 44 years old. After last night, I feel 45. My people, and younger than me, our Medicare and Social Security is going to be different. One way or the other, it's going to be different. If we do nothing, it'll be different. It won't exist. If we act now, it'll be different. I'm going to have to work 1 year longer than my parents did. When I retire, my benefits aren't going to grow as fast as my parents' benefits may have grown, especially if I've made some money. These are not draconian changes. I have 30 years to plan for this. The point is, it is not too much to ask for future generations to accept the Social Security and Medicare that's different than our parents, because in return, we can balance our budget, we can save those programs, and people who are on them now will not have to experience a single disruption. And this is the only way we're going to be able to deal with it. If we do these things, I don't want to burn too much time, so let me hurry up. If we do these things, we will lead the world in creating the best jobs of the 21st century. And that reminds you of why this country so desperately needs limited government and free enterprise. Because only limited government and free enterprise can make these things possible. We can lead the world in the best jobs of the 21st century, jobs that pay more than the jobs that are going away. Yes, we won't have as many cashiers taking your order at the fast food restaurant. Your order is going to be with a touch screen. But the good news is the people that installed that touch screen, maintain that touch screen, and one day will replace that touch screen, they make a lot more than the cashier did. Which reminds us of the second challenge that we face, and that is the best new jobs of the 21st century are going to require more skills than the jobs of the 20th. The problem is we also have an outdated higher education system. It begins with the fact that we no longer do vocational training in America, and for the life of me, I don't understand why. Why don't we teach young Americans? Why don't we teach people in high school how to fix airplanes and cars, how to be welders and plumbers and electricians? You know what? These jobs pay a lot more than Greek philosophers make. And we can graduate people from high school ready to work in these careers. When I'm President of the United States, God willing, we will do what we did when I was Speaker of the Florida House. We will help more people enter vocational careers so when they graduate, they can find a job and they can support their families and have upward mobility. Here's a second challenge. And let me tell a real story to give you this second challenge, because you probably know someone. Maybe this is you. Imagine if you're a single mother. You're raising 2 children. You work as a receptionist in an office. And you make $14 an hour. That is not a lot of money. The only way you're ever going to get a raise is if A, you win the lottery, or B, you go back to school and acquire skills that allow you to get a better paying job. The problem is, how can you go back to school? You have to work full time and you have to raise a family. We can change that. We can change that by allowing people to acquire a degree based on what they have learned, not how many hours they sat in a classroom. So that you get credit for what you've already known. If you've been alive, if you've worked in places, if you're a natural learner, you've learned things. Someone should give you credit for what you already know. And then whatever you are missing, you should be allowed to package it through a variety of sources: online coursework, work experience, life experience, unpaid internships. Basically package all of that learning into the equivalent of a college degree. Flexible programs that allow people who have to work full-time to acquire the learning they need for a better paying job. The private sector is already doing this. We need to do more of it as a nation by opening up financial aid outside of the monopoly of higher education to allow people to learn in alternative ways. You know why that's not possible? Because higher education today is a monopoly. What it means is you have to be an accredited college or university in order to award degrees. Well, guess who accredits the colleges and universities? The colleges and universities. And so since they accredit themselves, they don't want any competition. And since they have no competition, they can charge you whatever they want. So you increase Pell Grants, they increase tuition. You make more loans available, they charge you more. And what do they use that money for? To build pools, to build gyms, to build workout facilities, not to improve student quality. From now on, in this country, we need to ensure that every American can acquire learning and a degree and a better paying job, so that single mother, instead of making $14 an hour, can make $60,000 a year as a paralegal or a dental hygienist. That'll change her life. That'll change her family's life. I'm not saying that traditional higher education doesn't have a place. After all, where are we going to get college football if we don't have traditional higher education? I'm not saying it doesn't have a place. Here's what I am saying. We can't graduate people anymore with thousands of dollars in student loans and a degree that doesn't lead to a job. And so I believe that before you take out a loan, schools should have to tell you, this is how much people make. when they graduate with the degree that you are seeking from our school, and then you can decide if it's smart to borrow $50,000 to be a Roman or Greek philosopher, because the market for those philosophers has tightened over the last 2,000 years. If we modernize our economic policies, by the year 2020, we will lead the world in the production of those best jobs. If we modernize higher education, we will have the most skilled workforce in the world. 2 more quick topics that we have to touch. The first is, we cannot fulfill our potential if we are not safe. And that's why America must remain the strongest military power on the planet. We are losing our edge. Or we have a foreign policy that treats our adversaries better than our allies. We have a president that's more respectful of the Ayatollah in Tehran than he is of the Prime Minister of Israel. We have a deal with Iran that guarantees that they're going to have a nuclear weapon and the ability to strike this very city before a decade is out. These are dangerous developments. We have the spread of radical jihadists, and it isn't just ISIS. Al-Qaeda is still in business. They didn't become stockbrokers. They're still looking to kill Americans. So is al-Nusra and the Khorasan group. Radical jihadists have spread across multiple continents in dozens of countries, including the United States. And we need to find them before they find us. We need to know more about them than they know about us. We need to be able to confront China in the Asia-Pacific region before they take over the most important shipping lane in the world. We need to reinvigorate NATO before Vladimir Putin redraws the lines of Europe. We need to have answers to Iran's nuclear program before they're able to strike and attack us, and we must work with our allies in the Middle East to defeat radical jihadists, because they will not stop, they will not go out of business, they must be defeated. And my final point, and I'm abbreviating this for the purposes of time, my final point, by the year 2020, there is something that will be true in the year 2020 that has always been true. You can't have a strong country without strong people. And you can't have a strong people without strong values. No one is born with strong values. Strong values are taught to you. Strong values are instilled in you. And strong values have to be reinforced. Strong values, hard work, discipline, self-control, respect for others. Every single one of us has to be taught these things. They have to be instilled and they have to be reinforced until it's our turn to do the same for our children. Those strong values, where are they taught? They're taught in the family. So why are those values eroding? Because the family's eroding. The family in America's eroding. And it's had a devastating economic impact on our country. The single greatest determinant of economic and academic performance is a strong family. I always tell people, they say, you don't come from privilege. I said, oh yes, I do. I was raised by 2 parents who were married to each other, loved us, and raised us in a strong and stable home. That's an extraordinary advantage. So what can government do about it? Well, look, the primary job of having strong families is on us as individuals, is on us as fathers and mothers, husbands and wives, members of a community, volunteers in our church. That's where the real difference happens in America on a daily basis. That's the greatest contribution any of us can ever make. But we have to have a government that's pro-family in its policies. We have to have a tax code that no longer punishes marriage. We have to have a tax code like I do that's pro-family, that allows working families to keep more of their money, not the government's money. We have to have safety net programs that don't punish you for getting married. We have to have safety net programs that encourage work and education, that say if you're going to be receiving government assistance, you either have to be working or you have to be going to school so you can find a better paying job and never rely on it again. But we also need a government and a policy that protects the right of protects those institutions that assist us in instilling those values. And no institution in our society has played a greater role in helping families to instill values in their children than the faith community. And that's why I believe this country needs an attorney general and a Supreme Court justices, in fact, justices across the board, who will protect and defend the right of every American to live out the teachings of their faith at home, at work, and in their businesses. So what does this all mean? If we can do these four things, I believe the greatest era in American history is within our reach. And you should too. There is no reason why the 21st century can't be better than the 20th century. There are literally hundreds of millions of people on earth that can now afford to buy what we build, what we sell, the services we offer. There are literally hundreds of millions of people who can now afford to invest with us, who can be our partners in trade and in commerce. This is an extraordinary development. We are just 5% of the world's population. We now have hundreds of millions of people we can do economic transactions with, and that means more prosperity for them and for us. The 21st century is a time of extraordinary promise, and we can lead the way. In fact, only America can lead the way. For the choice, if we decline, what does the world look like if America declines? Well, if America declines, someone else will rise up to try to take our place. But it won't be a country that believes that our rights come from our Creator. It won't be a country that respects human rights and dignity. It won't be a country that believes in freedom of speech or the right of each individual to fulfill their God-given potential. It won't be a country that respects religious liberty. If it's China, if it's Russia that replaces us, what kind of world do we leave for our children if the most powerful country in the world censors the internet, forces women to have abortions, and does not allow churches to choose their own leaders? Because this is the world we will leave our children if America declines. That is the stark choice before us. Which leads me to my final point, and I'll conclude. 6 years ago when I appeared before Red State, I was an extraordinary underdog, and I mean not me extraordinary, I was a deep underdog in the race. My opponent was the governor of Florida at the time, Charlie Crist. Yes. I can't, is that an ooh or a boo? I don't know, either way, yeah. Anyway, and I was trailing him by like 40 points in the polls. He was outraising me like 10-1. The only people that thought I could win all lived in my home. 4 of them were under the age of 10. And everything I knew about politics told me, you run, you'll lose. The entire establishment was him. I'll never forget going to Washington and meeting with a senatorial committee, and they told me, not only are you going to lose, you're going to get hurt in the process. I didn't know what that meant. For weeks, I was checking to make sure no one had loosened the tires in the car. But I ran anyway. Why? Well, there's a lot of reasons why I ran, but maybe the same one I'm running for now. And it's this. Not because I believed I was entitled to serve in the Senate or in politics. America doesn't owe me anything. But I have a debt to America I will never repay. You see, this isn't just the country I was born in. This is the nation that literally changed the history of my family. When my father was 9 years old, he was a young boy in Havana, Cuba, and then his mother died. And so my father had to leave school and go to work. He would work for the next 70 years of his life, and he would never go back to school. Years later, he married my mother, and in 1956, they came to America. Why? It was the only place on earth where people like them would have a chance. And they never made it big here. Never famous, never rich. They worked hard. It's interesting, when you're 9 years old, or 15 years old for that matter, you have big dreams. There's things you dream of being when you grow up. All of that was impossible for my parents. The very purpose of their life became to give their kids the chance to do all the things they never could. All the things that were impossible for them, they wanted them to be possible for us. That's what the purpose of their life became here in America. My father worked as a bartender in a hotel just like this, in banquet halls just like this. I actually worked with him a few of those events. He worked nights, he worked weekends, he worked holidays, he worked well into his 70s. He was grateful for the work he had, but that's not the life he wanted for us. My father stood behind a bar all those years in the back of a banquet hall just like this. So one day I could be anything I wanted, including standing on that stage last night before 24 million Americans as a candidate for the highest office in the land. The journey from behind that bar to where I live today, to me, that is the essence of the American dream. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us special. And so, yes, I ran for the Senate against extraordinary odds, and I run for president now for one very simple reason. I still want that journey to be possible for the people trying to make it now. Because I realize that every country in the world has rich people. Every country in the world has famous people. But only America has people that did what my parents did and what your parents did. Only America has millions of people that are able to do for their children what my parents did for me and what your parents did for you. What unites us as a people is that every single one of us is but a generation or two removed from someone who made our future the purpose of their lives, and that's what makes us special. And if we ever lose that, we stop being special. And so the reason why I entered public service, why I ran against Charlie Crist in that Senate race, and why I run for president now is because I want us to still be that kind of country. Because I believe that if we do a few simple but important things over the next few years, not only will that journey still be possible, it will be possible for more people than it's ever been. And we will be able to leave for our children, not just a great country, but the greatest nation, greater than it's ever been. And we will be able to say that we were the authors of a 21st century that history will record was also an American century. This is the opportunity before us, and I hope we embrace it. Thank you for the chance to talk to you today. God bless you. Thank you.
I do want to ask the first question. We have the situation in the Middle East with ISIS. We had a Republican president who we went to war with in Afghanistan and Iraq, and people tired of the war situation. How do you explain to people that ISIS is a threat we need to deal with, but it's not going to mean another Republican president who just keeps us at war?
Well, first, let's understand who ISIS is. ISIS is not new. ISIS was once called Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Okay? They were defeated by Sunnis. ISIS is a radical Sunni Muslim movement. Sunni tribes defeated ISIS with our help and drove them, then Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and drove them out into a border region. And they were nothing. They were out there, but they weren't really substantial. And then the civil war began in Syria. And that instability allowed this group that had moved into Syria to grow. And then they started getting more powerful and attracting donors. And then before you knew it, they crossed over into Iraq and seized territory and weapons. The only way that ISIS can ultimately be defeated is on the ground by Sunnis themselves. But they will require some help from us. For example, we can help them. We can help Sunnis themselves defeat ISIS. And when I mean Sunnis themselves, I mean people like the Egyptian army and the Saudis and the Jordanians who want to fight ISIS on the ground. What they need from us is air support, logistical support, tactical help, some special operations forces to help them with targeting. The fight has to be theirs. It's their region, and they want to take the fight on. What they require is American leadership. What's the alternative if we don't succeed? Well, I can tell you what's already happening. Today, ISIS is not just in Iraq and in Syria. ISIS is now in Afghanistan. They are openly battling with the Taliban to become the most incredible group in Afghanistan. ISIS today is in Libya. They control a port city called Darna that they're using to stage attacks, not just in the Sinai, but preparing attacks in Europe as well. ISIS has now affiliates throughout multiple countries in North Africa, including Uzbekistan and Europe and in the Caucasus. They are spreading, they are growing, and they are recruiting people within the United States as well. We have to be involved in the effort to defeat them, but the best way to defeat them is not with an American invasion. It's with American support for Sunnis themselves to defeat them, along with Kurds, and yes, even Christians. No one talks about them. We should also arm Christian militias that want to defend their wives and their families.
But I thought ISIS was junior varsity.
There's the junior varsity, where they've got a pretty strong junior varsity. ISIS is not unbeatable. It can be defeated, but you have to have the will to defeat them. You have to want to defeat them. You have to have a plan to defeat them. Your strategy can't just be, let's do the bare minimum and leave it for the next guy or gal to deal with it, which is what this administration is doing now.
Derek from Atlanta writes, as a student in high school, the fear of student debt terrifies me. Some estimates put textbook inflation at 800% and tuition inflation at 300%. How can you make college education more accessible to students?
That's a great question. First of all, it's through more competition. What drives up quality and drives down prices on everything? Competition and innovation. The same is true in higher education. For starters, I don't know what major he wants to have, but he shouldn't just be having to go to an accredited school. a traditionally accredited school. That's what Mike Lee and I have been working on, is alternative accrediting models that allow you to learn on your own. In fact, those things exist already, things like Coursera, that allow you to aggregate learning from a variety of different sources into the equivalent of a degree. That's for starters. Number two, in terms of avoiding the cost, we've instituted the notion that there should be something called a student investment plan that allows private investment groups to invest in our students. You come forward, you say, this is my life plan, here's my resume, here's my GPA, here's my transcripts, and you convince them to pay for your college in exchange for you paying a small percentage of your income over 10 years or 5 years. All the risk is on the investment group. This is a model that we've explored. This is a model that we've laid out as an alternative to student loans. But ultimately, it is the competition that's going to drive down tuition costs and increase choices and opportunity for students. Today, higher education in the traditional model, they have no competition, as I outlined in my speech. Only accredited colleges can offer degrees. And guess who accredits them? They accredit themselves. And so they use that power to keep out innovative competitors. This is in Spanish. It says, Marco, necesito 5 minutos de tu tiempo, muy importante, gracias. It means, I know how to save you a bunch of money on your car insurance by switching to Geico. No. I'm kidding. It says they need 3 minutes of my time later. Well, I know we're running to a next event, but we'll make that work somehow.
This is from Joe in Jackson, Louisiana. Would you appoint only strict constitutionalists to the Supreme Court?
Absolutely. In fact, unfortunately today we have 5 and on occasion 6 justices that believe the role of the Supreme Court is to manipulate the Constitution to reach the outcome that you want. In essence, their notion is let's be creative and figure out how we can spin this thing to justify what we think the right thing to do for the country. What we really need are people on the court that say no. It's very simple. If the Constitution didn't lay out a power, we don't have it. It belongs to the states and to the people. And you may have a policy opinion or whatever it may be, but that's not your job. Your job is to interpret and to apply the Constitution. I absolutely would do that. In fact, the next president will have maybe at least 1 and perhaps 2 appointments to make, and it could determine the future jurisprudence in this country for the next 20 years.
Now, I don't want to be rude, but you've all seen me shuffling through these questions because I was trying to get to one that I felt substantive. But I guess this is substantive because here I'm at well over a dozen of these that are basically the same thing. So this is, are you going to be at the opening of the new NWA Straight Outta Compton movie? And what do you think is the best rap album in the last 5 years?
Well, I don't know about the last 5.
All these are basically asking that.
Yeah, Eminem has a new album coming out that's apparently very good. I don't know the name of it, though, but I'm interested to hear that. I don't want to get into the hip-hop stuff, guys. These are not,
okay, so
no, let me just say, it's, my kids can't hear that stuff, you know what I mean? So, but the NWA movie looks really good, but the old school stuff from the late 80s, early 90s, that was the time I was growing up with that, but next question.
All right. I'm going to go to Jack from Woodstock, Georgia for the last question. Even if it means getting blamed by the media for doing it, even though it would be Barack Obama doing it, should Congress do everything, including risking a government shutdown, to defund Planned Parenthood? You know what? I actually was asked that twice already this week. Why doesn't anybody ask the Democrats in the media the following question? Are you willing to shut down the government to fund Planned Parenthood? No one ever asked that question. Let's flip it. If we were funding the NRA in the government, what would the headlines read? Republicans will shut down government unless NRA is funded. But here you have a radical group that basically is caught on camera talking about the dismembering of children, of unborn children, of how they carefully manipulate them to ensure that they can sell their organs in the marketplace. This is offensive stuff. And there's more outrage about a dead lion than there is about dead babies. So, the American people should not be funding an organization like this. And that's why I think the work that Joni Ernst and Ben Sass and others did last week was so important, which is we take the money that they're using, we take the money from Planned Parenthood, and we give it to federally qualified community health organizations that are providing health care to women without killing babies. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.